If you watched someone you loved disappear, slowly, painfully, piece by piece, and you had one chance to end it sooner than nature intended, would you take it? Because I did. And I haven't decided yet whether that makes me merciful or monstrous. My father's name was Gerald. Everyone called him Jerry. He was the kind of man who fixed things, not just broken appliances or crooked fence posts, but people. If you were angry at someone, Jerry would sit across from you at his kitchen table and listen until the anger wore itself out, and then he'd say something so plain and so right that you'd wonder why you hadn't thought of it yourself. He was 71 when the diagnosis came. Glioblastoma, stage 4. The oncologist, Dr. Renata, said the words like she'd said them 100 times before, because she probably had. Jerry took it quietly. He folded his hands on the table in that examining room, and he nodded slowly, like he was processing a piece of news that was unfortunate but not entirely surprising. My brother Marcus wanted to fight. He always did, that was Marcus. He had printed out clinical trial information before we even left the parking lot. Radiation, chemotherapy, experimental protocols. He talked about months and percentages and quality of life in a way that made quality of life sound like something you could bargain for if you were just aggressive enough about it. Dad went along with it at first. I think he did it for us more than for himself. The first 2 rounds of treatment were hard. The third was something else entirely. I drove him to his appointments on Tuesday mornings. I remember the smell of his jacket, that specific combination of wool and the antiseptic from the treatment center that had started to live inside the fabric no matter how many times I washed it. He stopped eating much around week 9. He started losing words. Not all of them, not at once, but they would slip, the wrong word arriving in place of the right one, and this look would cross his face, this brief flash of something that I can only describe as humiliation. Jerry had never been humiliated by anything in his life. That look undid me every time. One afternoon in October, a Tuesday, same as always, he was sitting in the recliner in my living room after treatment, and he was exhausted in a way that had gone past tired into something almost geological. I asked him if he wanted tea. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, very quietly, he said, "Mara, I'm done." Not asking, not complaining, just stating a fact with the same certainty he'd used to tell you it was going to rain. I didn't say anything. I made the tea. I sat with him, but I heard him. I heard exactly what he meant. Dr. Renata had given me her direct line. She'd done that early on, handed it to me specifically, not Marcus, and I didn't entirely understand why at the time. Maybe she saw something in how I watched my father. Maybe she was just being thorough, but I had it. Her number on a card in the side pocket of my bag. 3 days after that particular Tuesday, I called her. I didn't tell Marcus I was calling. I told myself I was just asking questions. I told myself I was getting information. But that's not really what I was doing, and I think I knew it the moment I dialed. I told Dr. Renata what my father had said. I told her he wasn't eating. I described the word slipping, the exhaustion, the look on his face. And then I said, and I remember this precisely because I've repeated it in my head approximately 10,000 times since, I said, "Is there a point at which continuing treatment causes more harm than pausing it would?" And she was quiet for a moment. And then she said yes, that in certain cases, a palliative redirection was the more compassionate path, and that if the patient had expressed a clear preference. And I said he had. She asked if he was able to express that preference directly, and I said he had difficulty communicating clearly since the last round. Which was true. It was true. But it wasn't the whole truth, because he'd been clear enough that Tuesday. He'd been clear as water. What I didn't tell Dr. Renata was that Jerry hadn't said he was done with treatment specifically. He'd said he was done. And I had decided, standing in my kitchen making tea he didn't really want, that I knew what he meant, that I understood my father well enough to translate that sentence into a medical instruction. Maybe I did. Maybe that was 30 years of knowing him distilled into one moment of terrible clarity. Or maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe I was watching the man who had fixed everything slowly become someone who couldn't find the word for window, and I couldn't stand it anymore, and I dressed that up in love and called it mercy. Dr. Renata shifted his protocol within the week. We moved to comfort-focused care. Marcus was blindsided. He accused the medical team of giving up. He never accused me, he didn't know to. Dad passed 6 weeks later, at home, in the recliner on a Thursday morning in November. It was peaceful. Marcus said it was peaceful too, eventually, once the anger moved through him. He said at least Dad got to go without more suffering. I nodded. I agreed with him. I have agreed with him every single time he's said it in the 2 years since. And I still don't know. I genuinely do not know if I made a decision for my father or instead of him. I don't know if I heard what he meant or if I heard what I needed. The difference between those two things should feel obvious. It doesn't. It feels like the same sentence read from two different directions, and I can't tell anymore which end I was standing on. What I do know is that I didn't tell anyone I made that call. Not Marcus, not my mother. I've told you, and you're the first. That's what I carry, not whether it was right. Just that I was the one who decided, and that I let everyone believe the decision made itself. I've asked myself 100 versions of the same question. Whether I acted out of love or exhaustion. Whether those two things were even different by that point. Whether knowing my father the way I did gives me the right I assumed, or whether a right like that doesn't exist, no matter how well you know someone. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure I want one. But I'll ask you what I keep asking myself. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments.